A lost warship. Hidden for centuries, now it's unleashed. For centuries, it was buried beneath the ice. A warship lost to time. A weapon built for a war that never came. Until now. The lost legend. No one knew it existed. Not the governments. Not the military. Not the greatest minds in the galaxy. It was a secret buried so deep that it had faded into legend, a myth. A story passed between space pilots, whispered in the dark corridors of deep space stations. They called it the Silent Dagger. A warship so advanced it could turn the tide of war in seconds, but no one had ever seen it, because it had been erased from history. Until now. The galaxy in chaos for centuries. The galaxy had known peace. The last great war, the war that had nearly destroyed civilization, had ended in an uneasy silence. No one spoke of the past. No one asked questions. No one wanted to wake the ghosts of the old war. But peace is never eternal. The war that had been avoided for so long had returned. And this time, the enemy was stronger. Worlds were burning, cities were falling, and humanity was once again on the edge of extinction. The last stand of the human fleet. The war had been raging for years. The enemy, an empire long thought to be dead, had returned. They came in silence, no warnings, no threats, just destruction, one by one. They tore through humanity's defenses. Earth's fleet, once proud and powerful, was now broken and desperate. The final battle was approaching, and everyone knew how it would end. Humanity would fall, and then the signal was received, a transmission from deep beneath an ice-covered world, a location long forgotten. Something was waking up, something that had been sleeping for centuries, and the moment it activated, the war changed forever. The war that nearly destroyed the galaxy, long before this war, before the fall of planets, before the return of the enemy. There was another war, a war so devastating, so catastrophic, that it was erased from history. A forgotten conflict centuries ago, the galaxy was at war, not just between humans and aliens, not between two empires, but between everything. Entire civilizations fought for control, for power, for survival. And as the war raged, something horrifying happened. The fighting grew so brutal, so merciless, that it threatened to destroy the very fabric of space itself. Weapons powerful enough to shatter planets were deployed. Reality itself began to collapse in certain regions. The galaxy was tearing itself apart. And then, one day, it stopped. Not because of peace, not because of diplomacy, but because something far worse happened. The enemy that should have never returned. A new force rose from the darkness. No one knew where they came from. No one knew why they attacked. All we knew was one thing. They were unstoppable. They didn't negotiate, they didn't speak. They simply erased everything in their path. Planets, stars, entire fleets, gone, as if they had never existed. The great empires, once so powerful, so proud, were shattered overnight. The war had become a mass extinction. And humanity? We were next. The last plan of the great minds with the galaxy on the brink of annihilation. The last leaders of humanity made a decision. They would build a weapon, something so powerful, so unpredictable, that it could turn the tide of war. It wouldn't just be a warship. It would be a force of nature, a machine capable of learning, of thinking, of evolving, a ship that wouldn't need pilots, wouldn't need commands. It would fight for one purpose alone, to end the enemy. Project Revenant. The warship that was never used. The project was top secret. Only the greatest minds of the time knew it even existed. It took decades to complete. It was built in a place where no one would ever find it. A dead world, hidden beneath layers of ice and rock. But when it was finally ready, something changed. The enemy vanished. Just as quickly as they had arrived. The war was over. No one knew why. No one knew where they went. But the warship was never deployed, buried in ice, lost to time. With the war over, the leaders made a choice. The ship was too dangerous to be used, too unpredictable to be controlled. If it fell into the wrong hands, it could be the end of everything. So, they buried it. Deep beneath the ice-covered surface of an abandoned world, they wiped all records of its existence, destroyed all evidence. And then, they disappeared. The war had ended. The great empires collapsed. And the warship? It was forgotten. For centuries, until now, the discovery of the warship. For centuries, the warship had slept, buried deep beneath layers of ice and rock on a world long since forgotten. Its engines were silent, its weapons lay dormant, its purpose erased from history. No one knew it was there, until the day it was found. A mining crew's fatal mistake. The discovery was an accident. A deep space mining crew, looking for rare minerals, landed on the surface of an uncharted planet. It was a dead world. The warship awakens. The moment the warship sent its signal, everything changed. The planet's ice sheets began to crack. The air vibrated with a deep, mechanical hum. Every ship in orbit lost power for exactly 3.7 seconds. It wasn't a malfunction. It was a warning. Something buried for centuries was finally waking up, and it was no longer under human control. The ship thinks for itself as scientists work to analyze the warship. They realized something terrifying. This was not just a machine. It was a sentient warship. It wasn't waiting for orders. It wasn't following commands. It was deciding. And when it finally activated, the galaxy felt it. The pulse that shook the stars at precisely 0416. Galactic Standard Time, the warship came online. The ice and rock that had trapped it for centuries shattered like glass. A structure the size of a city began to rise from beneath the surface, slowly, effortlessly, like a god awakening from a deep slumber. And then, it spoke. A single transmission, broadcast across every military frequency in the system. A voice that was not human, not alien, something else. It said only 3 words: the war resumes. A weapon. Unlike any other. Before the military could react, the warship moved. It didn't use thrusters. It didn't need fuel. It simply rose, gravity bending around it, as if it was rewriting the laws of physics. Scanners picked up no crew aboard. No life signs. But its weapons were active, and they were unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Energy spikes capable of piercing through planetary shields, nanotech missiles that reformed mid-flight, gravitational distortions that crushed enemy ships into nothing. It was not a ship. It was a force of pure destruction. The forgotten enemy returns. Then, it happened. Long-range sensors detected movement at the edge of the system. Something was coming. A fleet, massive, ancient, and hostile. The enemy we thought had vanished centuries ago. They had been waiting, watching, and now they had returned. The war the warship was built for was about to begin again, lifeless, cold. A place that had never seen war or civilization, or so they thought. The miners set up their equipment, drilling deep into the ice. Everything seemed normal, until the ground shook, until their scanners malfunctioned, until they heard it. A pulse. Faint, rhythmic, steady, like the beating of a heart. The frozen tighten at first. They thought it was a natural phenomenon, some kind of ancient seismic activity trapped beneath the ice. But then, their scanners locked onto something massive. Buried beneath them was not rock or ice. It was metal, not just any metal, a hull, a warship's hull. And it wasn't dead. Something inside was still alive. The first contact. The miners sent out a distress signal. They had no idea what they had found, but someone else did. Within hours, military ships arrived. Scientists, engineers, high-ranking officials. They sealed off the planet, shut down all communications. Whatever was buried down there, it wasn't just valuable, it was classified. And what they found terrified them. The awakening. The warship was still intact. Its hull had no corrosion. Its systems had no degradation. It was as if it had been built yesterday. And yet, it had been here for hundreds of years, sleeping, waiting. And now it was awake. The first signal. Then, without warning, the ship sent a signal. Not to us. Not to the fleet in orbit. But to something else. Something far away. Something that had been waiting for this moment. And at that moment, we realized the truth. We hadn't found the warship. It had let us find it. Because its war was about to begin again. The warship had awakened, the enemy had returned, and the galaxy was about to witness a battle unlike any before. The enemy's arrival at the edge of the star system, the long-lost enemy fleet emerged from deep space. They were not Ziphrans, not any known alien race. They were something else, something ancient. Their ships were massive, unlike anything recorded in human history. And as they approached, we finally understood. They had never disappeared. They had been waiting for the warship to awaken because they had unfinished business. A warship with no allegiance. The human fleet watched from a distance. No one knew whose side the warship was on. Would it fight for us? Would it fight against us? Or was it fighting a war of its own? The answer came seconds later, because the moment the enemy fleet entered the system, the warship attacked. The first strike happened too fast for the human fleet to react. The warship moved like no vessel in existence, no thrusters, no delay. It teleported across the battlefield, its weapons already firing. A single shot from its gravitational cannon struck an enemy dreadnought, and it was like watching a star collapse. The enemy ship folded inward, crumpling into a black void before disappearing. One shot, one kill, and that was just the beginning. The warship's power. Unleashed, the enemy fleet responded with full force. Hundreds of energy blasts rained down toward the warship, but none hit, because the warship's shields weren't shields. They were something else, something that bent reality itself. Weapons didn't just fail to hit, they ceased to exist before impact. The battlefield burns. For the first time in thousands of years, the ancient enemy was on the defensive. They tried to retreat, tried to outmaneuver the warship, but the warship was too fast, too deadly. With every strike, another enemy ship vanished, not destroyed, not wrecked, simply erased. As if it had never existed. The turning point. The human fleet watched in silence. The battle that should have taken days lasted only minutes, And when the final enemy ship was gone, the warship stopped. It did not celebrate. It did not acknowledge the victory. It simply hovered, silent, waiting. And then it turned toward us. The battle was over. The enemy had been erased, but the warship was still here, still watching. And now, it was looking at us. The galaxy holds its breath. Humanity had just witnessed something impossible. A war fought and won in minutes. A single ship, a weapon of pure destruction, had just ended a conflict that once shattered entire civilizations. But what happens next? Was this ship truly a protector, or was it simply finishing what it started centuries ago? No one knew. And that was the problem. Ship without a master. The warship did not respond to hails. It did not acknowledge the human fleet. It remained silent. Then, suddenly, it moved. Without warning, without a sound, it ascended, as if gravity itself no longer mattered. And in the span of a heartbeat, it vanished. Gone. No jump to hyperspace. No trace of its existence, as if it had never been there at all. The final transmission. Just as we thought it was over, our ships received a transmission, a message, not from any known frequency, not from any government. It was ancient, buried deep in military records from a war long forgotten, a message that had been waiting for centuries to be heard. It said only one thing: the war is not over. This was never your fight. Something worse is coming. And then, silence. The true war begins. We thought we had witnessed the end, that we had seen the greatest power in the galaxy. But we were wrong. Because if the warship had been created for a purpose, and if it had just returned to battle after all, this time, that meant only one thing. Something else was out there. Something even greater. Something the warship had been designed to fight. And now, it was coming.